You know, we've also found there has to be a very strong program or system in a school, something systemic, where children know that they're not going to get away with any kinds of bullying behaviors. You may notice that I keep saying bullying behaviors rather than bullying or calling a child a bully, because I tell the kids, if I were to call them a bully or him or her a bully, then I'd be name calling. And the prognosis, and it's really a really bad name to call somebody, because the prognosis for a bully is not a good one. 25 children who are identified as hardcore bullies per se have a 25% greater chance of having a criminal record by the time they're 24, because they feel they've gotten away with something. So in schools, we need to address the needs, the psychological and emotional needs of our children with the bullying behaviors, as well as provide support for the victimized child. So if we look at the child with the bullying behaviors, it's important to have that child develop empathy through counseling groups, through our support staff, because that's really what a child with those behaviors is missing. And sometimes even go outside to outside counseling. But within the school day, if we can develop with that child some way that they can prove that they understand that they've been making a classmate's life unhappy, and to come up with a plan, a lunchtime plan, or a free period plan, where they can actually show that they are including somebody in their activities, to expand their group at lunchtime that they usually play with, to include a child that they have made unhappy on another occasion. This was sort of an interesting story about a third grader who really throughout the year has been unkind to a new student, who was a child who had come new into his classroom. And he recently came in with his father, and I was explaining to his father how he's making a child's life very unhappy, and it's been ongoing. And I called in at that time, and we're talking now perspective taking and some restorative justice kind of activity. I gave an in-school suspension to the boy who was being so unkind to this other boy that he really could not establish himself in the classroom at all, because he would constantly be challenging him. If the boy said, "Oh, I went to Maryland, I saw my brother at college this weekend," he would say things to him like, "You don't even have a brother." You know, just plain, cruel, ridiculous things that he would say to him. So I did bring the little boy, the other child, during this day that the child was being kept out of class. I brought in the other child to try to get an understanding of where this had all begun. And it seemed that they had both challenged each other in the beginning of the year, that the new boy had thought he would automatically make friends, and the child with the power had felt threatened by the new boy who had come in. So we talked about ways, what can we do now to make this better? It happened that both children were of Russian origin. In fact, the way I found, I knew it, but the funny thing that happened was that I said, you know, to the one little boy, Lenny, we'll call him, said, you know, when we bring in Brandon, we can just talk in Russian to each other. I said, oh no, well then I'm not going to understand what you're saying, so we have to have this conversation in English. But when they came in, we developed an idea that said, hey guys, how would you two like to work together to maybe teach some of the other children in your class some Russian phrases or Russian words, or develop a little curriculum to do that? They said, great idea. And so for the next few days, they started to work together, and I really saw them on several occasions, and I'm not going to say that this is going to be forever, working on the computer. They found something on the computer where that translates words from English to Russian. They were making flashcards. But Lenny decided he would work with the other little boy to come up, work together, and create a plan to teach the other children in the class. You know, the other kinds of things would be on the playground, to ask a child who's been exclusive in his play, because exclusion is really I think the most dangerous kind of bullying. To ask him to form games, to develop teams, to make sure everybody had a spot on that team. Or to ask children to develop a plan for lunch tables where everybody had a friend. To get them involved with the interactive work that's going to have kids be able to work together. Those are, and there are many other kinds of things to do, and it's a new paradigm, because what we're used to doing is saying, okay, you are unkind, have a hierarchy of consequences, and I'll tell you actually what I thought is somewhat effective, but not effective enough. When a child comes to me, it's been reported what happened, in terms of any of the bullying behaviors or any kind of misbehavior. I ask the child what happened, and he'll tell me, and I'll ask, why do you think that happened? What do you need to do differently next time, and how will it be different? I ask that child to write a letter to his parents, starting with, dear mom, dear dad, dear whoever they live with, I made a mistake today. And to go in their own words what the mistake was. Next time, this is what I'm going to do differently, and have that letter signed by their parent. It serves two purposes. One is that principal doesn't get a phone call from the parent saying, well, what you're saying isn't true, because the child in his own words is telling them what happened. I also have a large library in my office of books with caring messages, where the child is asked to read one of those books and then talk about or write, depending on their age level, what they learned from that book. But at the same time, the child is missing a recess as a consequence. And I explain to them also, why are you having a consequence? What's the purpose of this? And I tell them it's really to keep the other children on the playground safe. Not necessarily physically safe, but emotionally safe, because when you're out there, they can't have an enjoyable recess time. So that's the perspective taking that we do, that the kid understands. We try to get them to understand what's happening, not just to stay in. But the restorative justice piece would be a part where they're actually feeling it and becoming involved in some component of a solution to the problem that has been created by the child, him or herself.